Hey, welcome to the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast. Your questions answered by the pros you trust. My name is Cole. I am one of the hosts on the show. And today we are starting another two-part episode. Today will be part one, obviously, where I had a conversation with Aaron Rogers, the owner and president of Pro Exteriors. While my hoodie might not suggest this, the sunshine coming in through my window shows that summer is just around the corner, and many of us are going to be spending the majority of our time outside, or at least we're going to want to. So this is part one of a conversation I had with Aaron where we talk all things decking. So if you are in the market for renovating your deck or replacing it or building one from scratch, this is an episode for you. We're going to talk a lot about the pre-planning that goes in, the considerations to think about, material choices, and then next week we will wrap up the conversation. But for now, here's part one of my conversation with Aaron Rogers, all about decks. This is the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast. Do you have questions about an upcoming exterior contracting project? We've got answers. Welcome to the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast. Today we are back in our respective studios, and we are going to tackle another question that we get asked pretty frequently. I am going to play the role of the homeowner, and Aaron's going to play the role of the expert, because that is what we are in real life. So, Aaron, the question today is, where do I start if I want to build a new deck?
Great question. So typically when you're going to look at a deck project, you're going to want to look at kind of the area where you feel like it's the most appropriate. You're going to have some issues in most of the areas locally. You really need to figure out what your setbacks are and what you can actually build. Doing that on the front end prior to meeting with a contractor is ideal for us. We want to come out there. We want to give you everything you want. Every once in a while, we'll come up in a situation where somebody asks for something, and then we get further down the process and find out we can't actually build what they want. So knowing what you're able to build, knowing where your building setbacks are, trying to figure out what your current code is. I mean, most of these things your contractor can help you with, but these are kind of the things on the front end that really kind of give you a better idea as far as how far you can take the project.
So real quick, I want to jump in and in your simplest terms, what is the setback of a property?
So a setback, or some people call it a building restriction line. If you look at the border of your property and you come in, it can be anywhere between, say, 20 to 30 feet. You can't build anything within that line. No permanent structure can be built. They do allow you to do fencing and things like that right up to your property line because they're not considered a permanent thing. But the building restriction line or your setbacks are basically the imaginary line that you can't do anything in that area.
So to take it from like a baseball terminology, it would sort of be like the warning track,
Yep.
But it's invisible.
Correct.
Or it creates a buffer. And then would you suggest, as the homeowner, would it be also wise for me to check into any HOA restrictions prior to meeting with the exterior specialist?
100%. Dealing with an HOA and dealing with a property management company is something we do quite often. Most of your local communities where we are going to have an HOA. Most of them are run by a property management company, so a third-party company. They usually have forms in regards to what you are and are not allowed to do. Looking into that stuff on the front end. Again, the idea is trying to limit the amount of time that you, as the homeowner, and us as the contractor, kind of spin our wheels talking and designing a project before we find out that the HOA, the community, won't allow it anyway. So usually they can send you that form. You may or may not already have it. One of the other things with HOAs is they usually have a form that we have to fill out. We usually do that for the customer just to kind of simplify the process. But that's something typically you would only have access to. We typically don't have access to that.
Okay.
So any of those documents you can have in hand prior to meeting with a contractor. Again, just simplifies the entire process, keeps the ball rolling as quickly as we possibly can.
All right. So, in some of your experience, I imagine you've gotten to the end of some decking projects, and a homeowner, or maybe even one of our contract or carpenters, has said, "Man, it would have been cool if we had done this."
Mhm.
After kind of finding out more about how the deck is going to be used,
Yeah.
I know it probably could go without saying, but I want to say it anyway. Just what are some of the applications that you've seen that people use their decks for?
An extension of their dining room and their living room is probably the most used. Um, with that being said, typically whatever size you have in your mind, it's not going to be big enough to do everything you want on that deck. We see quite often people are like, they have a certain budget they want to stick to, or they already have an idea of the size they want. They saw something on, Pinterest or HGTV, where this is the size deck they had and this is what they're able to do with it. Um, we see quite often that decks get real closed in real quick once you put, lounge furniture on it, maybe a dining room table, a grill. Yeah, they get small real quick.
And I've seen decks. We just moved into a new house. We have a pretty basic deck on our back, in our backyard, off of a slider. But I've seen super simple structures. I've seen ones that have all sorts of lighting and stuff built into it.
Yeah.
Before I even contact a company like Pro Exteriors, is it wise to have kind of all the applications, all the things that I want to be able to do, to have that in mind, to kind of have a wish list
Yeah.
written out?
Yeah. So having a wish list, Pinterest is a great resource for almost any sort of home project. You can get ideas as far as the overall look and kind of feel you want for the deck. Knowing somewhat what you plan on doing with the deck helps us because we know roughly how big it should be. If it's just you and your spouse, you don't need a ginormous deck. If you never entertain, again, a 4-person table versus an 8-person table, all of that information is stuff that we try to figure out during the initial meeting. But that information on the front end helps us to kind of navigate or kind of steer you in the right direction when it comes to size and products. Things like low voltage lighting, it's really good to know about those things on the front end because one of the things we have to look at is where's our existing electrical.
Mm.
Locating your sprinkler heads is always one of those things that people kind of forget about. Like we can build a brand new deck where there's not one currently, but most likely you're going to have sprinkler heads that have to get moved. So that's something that pops up often.
Okay. Just a quick plug to our audience. Pro Exteriors does have a Pinterest account, and we recently uploaded some different mood boards for some of some of our favorite material that we install for decks. So if you wanted to search at Pro Exteriors Delmarva, you can get some design inspo, as they say.
Shout out to
There.
Kara. Kara,
Yeah, shout out to Kara.
phenomenal job, Kara.
Yeah. Okay, so I haven't even, at this point in our conversation, in this kind of role-playing thing, as a homeowner, I've not even contacted you yet.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of put a list together. Maybe it would be wise to do a list of negotiables versus non-negotiables.
Yeah, wants versus
even...
needs. Like this is what I absolutely need, and this would be nice to have if we can get that as well. So, yeah, a lot of it comes down to budget. A lot of homeowners don't feel comfortable sharing the budget with their contractor, especially say if they're interviewing multiple contractors, they don't want to give their budget to multiple contractors. But in all reality, if you feel really, really comfortable with a contractor, if he's asking all the right questions, give him your budget because ultimately we're trying to maximize what we can give you for that budget.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we have that on the front end and we have a good idea as far as how you're going to use the space, we can really give you the best advice as far as like where you need to put that money. Where's the biggest, bang for your buck? So share your budget.
Yeah.
We're not going to try and maximize your budget. If you say like, hey, this is what I'd like to spend and this is as far as we can go, great. Then I'm going to try to stay in that, like what you would like to spend range. And then I'm going to give you options that would push you to that further end if you choose to go there. So
Got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All right, so I've got my list together of wants and needs. Kind of have a budget number in mind. I've
Mm-hmm.
contacted a company to come out. What happens next?
So typically, when we go and meet with a customer, we're going to go out. We're going to talk to them about first is going to be the space. We're going to look at the space. We can typically get a rough idea about where our setbacks and building restriction lines are just by walking the property, based
Hmm.
upon kind of what the neighbors may have, or if they don't have to worry about that, maybe they don't live in a development. We don't have to worry about that at all. I'm going to talk about what I think ultimately they have the options for. I'm going to listen to kind of how they respond and how they're going to use the space. And I'm going to say, well, in the past, projects like this typically have a deck of this size. I always suggest that people kind of look at the deck, figure out furniture wise, and before we put the stairs in a certain spot,
Mm,
let's look at the kind of the walkability, kind of the way you would design a kitchen. You're going to walk around furniture. You're going to walk from, the back door to the stairs. What do you have to walk around to get there? Entertaining is always one of those things. If somebody likes to entertain, we may consider bumping up the framing just a little bit. It's basically an interview. Uh,
okay.
we want to know everything you're going to do on that deck. So we could talk about all the different things, all the different options, the types of decking, the types of railings, the lighting, the speakers, the stonework, the lattice work, all the individual options. Again, we're trying to give them a full picture of what they could have, and then we're going to try and kind of define that a little bit more before we start giving them estimates. We talk a lot about minimum code. Uh, the current code that we use here, the 2021 code, the minimum code for framing, specifically for decks, is not the best. Um,
Mm,
I wholeheartedly believe that minimum code for decks is lacking seriously. So we like to really dive into the framing part and explaining exactly what minimum code is versus kind of how we do things. Um, and then we can start talking about products and what's required and what's not required.
okay. Well, you just mentioned products. In our roofing episode, we talked about how the shingles or the metal or the cedar was just one part of the whole roofing
Yeah,
system, but it's the part that gets talked about the most because it's the part you see.
correct.
So I want us to shift a little bit to the decking
Okay.
materials. Let's start actually before we get to what goes on top of the deck. So the actual decking, what is typically used in the framing?
So your standard is going to be pressure treated lumber.
Okay.
It's pretty much the gold standard for any exterior product. Is most likely going to be framed with pressure treated lumber. They do have some other options. They actually have steel framing now that is. It's not new per se. It's not really used in this area, uh, but it's got a little bit more engineered strength, and you have a little bit more options with it. It's just not a readily available product here, so still kind of gaining some momentum there.
Yeah, that seems like that would probably be more of a niche thing. And I'm guessing that has to be manufactured for the specific application as opposed to pressure treated lumber where it can be cut on site or.
Not so much. It's
Okay.
you can cut it with normal hand tools. It's just a specialty blade essentially.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of accessibility.
Okay.
There's nobody in our local area that's going to stock that. So if you run short on something, it's got to be ordered. Um, so yeah,
All right. So pressure treated, most people listening or watching know what pressure treated lumber
mm-hmm.
is. I would say most, but
Most.
for the people that don't, pressure treated lumber is simply lumber that's been treated
Mm-hmm.
with pressure and with some sort of chemical, right?
Yep, it's an ACQ, so it's a copper based treatment to kind of make the board itself kind of weather resistant. We'll call it not weatherproof, weather resistant. Um, it's still you're going to have varying grades. Like this can go in the ground, this can't go in the ground.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, so you've got some different grades, but overall, your standard pressure treated, you can get it at Lowe's, Home Depot, pretty much any supplier out there. Yeah, it's the gold standard. So,
All right. So I know what the framing's made out of. All right, let's talk a little bit about some of the options when it comes to the decking, like the deck boards.
okay.
Could you just run me through some of the options
Yep.
in no particular order?
Okay. So we'll start off with your wood options. So pressure treated decking is kind of your most basic grade that you're going to get. You can have a standard grade and a premium grade. Premium grade is just going to have kind of smaller knots.
Mm,
It's just going to last a little bit longer. It's got a different graining to it. And then staying in the wood, you can have cedar decking. You have some kind of hardwoods like Ipe, some other Brazilian hardwoods that you can kind of that you can use.
okay.
Teak, like is used on boats. Again, very very expensive, but still a wood option. And then from wood, you're going to go into your basic composites. Basic composites aren't quite as popular anymore, but they're essentially melted milk jugs and wood chips.
Mm,
So they tend to break down a little quicker than your cap composite. The step up from there would be the cap composite. Cap composite has a cap stock that goes around it. We compare it to like your car's dashboard, where it's all technically plastic, but the top part, the part you actually see and touch, that's the part where you really put the technology in because it gets beat up by the sun. Your wife may put their feet up on the dash. Your kids might put their feet up on the dash while you're driving. Uh, but yeah, so two different versions of that. You have one that's basically capped on three sides, where the bottom is just your bare composite, and then you have the nicer brands have capped on all four sides, so it completely encompasses the board. And then from there, you can go into your PVC decking, which is going to be kind of your higher end. And then there's kind of some niche products from there. You've got some niche capped composites and some niche PVCs that are hyper specific to mimic another product.
mm,
So there's some that try to mimic what looks like real actual hardwood, that can get very very pricey. But ultimately, what it comes down to is they're not necessarily any different. You're paying for the final product, the final aesthetic look. They still make aluminum decking. It's not really super popular. You can get concrete tiles. You can get ceramic tiles. I mean, there's really no limit. Uh, they make composite, what looks like composite pavers. It actually sits on top of a little grid on top of the framing, so you can walk out onto your brand new deck and it looks like you're walking on cobblestones. I mean, there's there's a lot of options, a lot of brands, a lot of options, a lot of price points.
What would you say the asphalt shingle of decking options would be? Because even within asphalt shingles, we talked about how there's different grades of it. So
Yeah.
what is the kind of the equivalent, like the bread and butter of decking jobs that we do?
So Cap Composite is the market leader. Um, you know, wood, pressure treated wood now is not what it used to be. So, we routinely rip off pressure treated decks that were built 30, 40 years ago, that, have seen better days, but overall still have some life in them. The majority of the pressure treated decking that we install today, um, 15 years from now, is probably going to need to be replaced. It's younger lumber. It doesn't have the tighter grains. The ACQ treatment that they use doesn't last as long as the old stuff. The old stuff was arsenic based. This stuff is
Mm.
copper based. So the arsenic lumber lasts a lot longer. Um,
The
surprisingly,
people installing it,
yeah.
probably not
Uh,
as much.
but yeah, so that lumber tend to last a lot longer. And now the copper stuff has been around for probably about 20 years now. They completely switched the market overnight. But yeah, Cap Composite's probably the market leader. I don't know exactly what percentage of share it is, but standard composite's not really a thing. I think a lot of people over the last 20 years kind of got the standard composite, and realized how quickly it deteriorates. It molds. It's not even remotely maintenance free, no matter what they sell it to you as. But it breaks down. It's still got a lot of organic compounds in it. So anything that has wood chips in it, it's going to have issue. It's going to break down. It's not going to have the same UV resistance as some of the other products. But Cap Composite, you still have a lot of products on the market that have a great price point. You don't have the maintenance. You don't have to pressure wash it really. You don't have to stain it. You can do hidden fasteners, pretty simply. So yeah.
I am wishing I'd had this conversation with you before our deck was built on our house. Viewer, listener, I do not live in the service area of Pro Exteriors, as I've mentioned before on a past episode. And so I didn't really have the option to use Pro Exteriors when we were having our house built. And yeah, like you said, some of our deck material, we have pressure treated lumber. You can already tell it's brittle,
Yeah.
and it was installed 6 months ago, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's not encouraging. So I hear if you were redoing the deck at your house, would you be doing a Cap Composite of some sort?
Me personally, I don't like to wear shoes, so I'd be doing PVC. Cap Composite,
Okay.
one of the big downsides to Cap Composite is in direct sunlight, it holds heat pretty good. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so in direct sunlight, Cap Composite can be extremely hot.
Gotcha.
PVC is like walking on sand in the morning, and Cap Composite's like walking on sand in the middle of the day. So if you ever walked on the beach in the middle of the day, you're going to be doing that little high knee, pinky toe.
Yeah, the scamper.
Yeah.
Yep.
On Cap Composite. So that's one of the questions that me personally, again, I don't do a lot of sales anymore, but when I do go and meet with customers, one of the first things I ask them is, do you like wearing shoes when you're home? Me personally, I'm a farm boy. I don't like wearing shoes. So yeah. So if you like wearing shoes, by all means. If you have young kids or you have a lot of animals at your house, I highly recommend paying for the PVC versus the Cap Composite, because your kids will thank you, your dogs will thank you.
That might be the pro tip of the episode so far.
Yeah.
All right, that is all we have for you today on the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast. Remember, this is just part 1 of a 2-part series. Be sure you come back next Friday for the conclusion of that conversation. Hey, would you please help us get the word out about the show? The best way to do that is to review us on Apple Podcasts, follow us on social media, or simply just tell a friend about the show. Also, if you are finding this on YouTube, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Before we go, we want to hear from you. This show does not exist without your questions. What questions do you have around remodeling, exterior remodeling, maybe the options that are out there, different considerations to take into account? Would you please send your questions to info@askproexteriors.com, and then in the subject, simply put, "You Ask." If you are facing an upcoming home project, we hope this episode has empowered you to tackle it with confidence. Remember, knowledge is power, and a little bit of research can go a long way. Until next time, happy homeowning. The You Ask the Pros Answer podcast is produced in-house by the Pro Exteriors team. Pro Exteriors is the exterior contracting division of Empire Construction Group, LLC. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. For more answers to your questions, please subscribe to this channel and podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Do you have an upcoming home remodeling project? Find more answers to your questions at askproexteriors.com.